What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to recap the 2022 Rookie Draft Class Dynasty Fantasy Football Edition. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the quarterback position and the running back position. I'll break down the wide receivers and tight end positions tomorrow. By the end of this video, you guys should know who the buys are at each position, who the sells are, who are we buying into, who are we not buying into. And also, I'm going to reveal where I had these guys rated pre-draft. So I'm going to eat some crow. I'm going to take some victory laps. It's going to be a fun one. So definitely stick around until the end. Leave likes, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0 second edition with new updates, with bucketed rankings, with buy, sell, hold advice, 2023 prospect rankings, top 45, coming soon as well. That will be dropping either today or tomorrow, so make sure you check out the Patreon if you guys want access to that. And we will also be dropping the Devy Rankings Manifesto, which is something brand new that we will get cracking on this draft season as well. So definitely stay tuned for all that. But before we get into it, let's hit the intro. To go position by position. I'm going to reveal the pre-draft grades that I had on these players, the order that I had them ranked, and then go in depth with their rookie seasons. Talk about what happened, where they're ranked now, what do I think of them going forward, whether you should buy them, whether you should sell them, whether you should hold them. Again, we're doing an in-depth look on the Dynasty rookie class from this past year and seeing what kind of lessons we can take away from it, as well as talking about practically what you should do with these players in Dynasty Fantasy Football League. So we're going to start with the quarterback position. Like I said, QBs and running backs, if you guys skip the intro, will be in today's video. And in tomorrow's video, I will break down the wide receiver and tight end positions. I could have probably done it all in one video, but this video will be like 30, 45 minutes long or something like that. And I wanted to make sure that this was succinct and digestible. So we're going to start with the QB position. You guys can see how I had the quarterbacks ranked pre-draft. Sam Howell, Matt Corral, Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, and Kenny Pickett were the only quarterbacks that I actually formally graded. So I did not grade Brock Purdy because I didn't know if he would even get drafted. He obviously ended up barely getting drafted as Mr. Irrelevant in the draft. I did, take a look more so into players once I saw draft capital, but those were the 5 quarterbacks that I graded. The order, like I said, Sam Howell first, Matt Corral second, Malik Willis third, Desmond Ridder fourth, and Kenny Pickett, the only first-round quarterback, fifth. So this quarterback class, as we know, coming in to the NFL draft cycle this past year, was not highly thought of. Coming into the draft, we expected a couple guys to go round 1, potentially at least go on day 2. They all slipped except for Kenny Pickett. He was the only one that went in the first round. On the screen, you guys can see where I have these guys graded now, with obviously hindsight from their rookie season, hindsight from, where we got draft capital and all that kind of stuff. All those pre-draft grades were before we knew where they were going, before we saw how high they went in the draft. Kenny Pickett is my quarterback 1, obviously, from this class. He was NFL season. He's quarterback 14 in my Dynasty rankings right now, quarterback 15 per keep trade cut. As I mentioned, Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0 probably dropping today or tomorrow. So if you guys want access to all of our rankings, you can check that out, patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. Obviously, I'm going to eat some crow right off the bat because he was my QB5 on a pure grade basis. But I do think, comparison-wise, I compared him to Daniel Jones. I do think that's kind of how he's been so far in his rookie season. He started off his rookie season slow, right? He wasn't necessarily the greatest quarterback in the world. There was really no distinction between him and Mitch Trubisky. But as the season went along, we saw 5 of the 70-plus PFF passing grades that Kenny Pickett showed throughout his rookie season of the 10 games that he started. All 5 of those grades came after week 12. So as the season went along, he got more comfortable with the offense, with the receivers. Of course, him and George Pickens had a nice connection down the stretch as well. So I do think Kenny Pickett has really, really helped himself to close out his rookie year. I think the arrow was pointing up, and I'm definitely going to eat some crow, like I said, on the grade that I gave him, because I gave him like an early 3rd-round grade, and he's obviously been better than that. However, in my defense, I did warm up to him once I saw that he was going to the Pittsburgh Steelers with first-round draft capital. That type of investment combined with a stable franchise, good coaching, and weapons should have made him a guy that I was a little bit higher on in rookie drafts. But I am absolutely comfortable holding Kenny Pickett right now as, one of the better, young quarterbacks that's not one of those elite guys in Dynasty, and maybe even a soft buy at market value right now. His Dynasty value has gone up since his rookie draft season, and of course, since before the NFL draft. So definitely a pick well spent if you guys were able to get Kenny Pickett, 108, 109, 110, 111 potentially in your rookie drafts. I think he was more than fine at that spot. So moving on to the QB2 from this draft class. Like I said, I did not grade this guy pre-draft, but right now, quarterback 2 from this draft class is Brock Purdy, who is quarterback 27 in my Dynasty rankings. He is quarterback 20 according to Keep Trade Cut. So I am quite a bit lower on him than consensus. I didn't even grade the guy, like I said, coming out of Iowa State. He was a fine fourth round dart throw, given that he went to San Francisco. However, I do think that you do need to sell him as it currently stands. He's played well, and it's very clear to me that he's at least going to give Trey Lance a run for his money to some degree. But at the same time, he's on par in terms of market value right now with Mac Jones, a first round draft capital quarterback who had a great rookie season, down second season. I think when you're talking about quarterbacks in this realm that actually have job security, I'd be way more willing to, move on from Brock Purdy and include a third round pick to get up to a guy like Mac Jones, as opposed to hold on to Brock Purdy and just hope that he somehow finds his way into a starting job. The Patriots will add weapons. They're going to add coaching, and I would take advantage of that selling window right now if you can. And remember, in Dynasty, it's always about market value. I do think Brock Purdy's a good quarterback. He's shown enough to tell me, I think this guy can at least lead an NFL team, at least operate this Kyle Shanahan offense in this scheme. His ceiling range of outcomes, though, in terms of his Dynasty value, is like the Kenny Pickett range, right? He's probably, even if Trey Lance was traded today and we knew that Brock Purdy was going to be the starter going into next season, I still think we're talking about Brock Purdy only being like quarterback 15 or so in Dynasty value, as opposed to the quarterback 20 that he is right now with all of that uncertainty. The downside risk is why you want to sell him, because if going into next year, they're like, Trey Lance is our guy, Trey Lance is our guy, Trey Lance is our guy, then I think that Brock Purdy's value is most likely headed down to the quarterback 30, quarterback 35 type of range, because he was a 7th round quarterback. He has a top 3 draft pick ahead of him on the depth chart. It's definitely not ideal for his long-term value, but I do think he's shown enough to say that at least he's probably a good backup in the NFL and a guy that's good quarterback depth. The only problem is you can get a lot more than just quarterback depth type of value for Brock Purdy right now, and I do think you should be selling. Quarterback 3 in my Dynasty rankings from this draft class, as it currently stands, is Sam Howell, who's quarterback 31 in my rankings, quarterback 32 in keep trade cut value. Like I said, he was my highest graded quarterback in the draft class. He ended up slipping, obviously, to the 5th round to the Washington Commanders, and I adjusted him after the draft once he slid down there. But for my money, his profile was best in the class. He had a freshman phenom type of season, round 1 caliber tape, his sophomore season, posting numbers comparable to Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, and Zach Wilson, who were obviously draft eligible quarterbacks that year. He started just 1 game this season for the Washington Commanders in week 18. But he looked like the quarterback that I saw at the University of North Carolina. He was running the ball. He posted a 68.5 PFF grade in his first start. And for what it's worth, it took Kenny Pickett 8 starts to get to that exact number, or to get to a higher number than that. It looks like Washington saw enough in that first game, because not only did he beat Dallas, he was able to show some of that mobility, show some of that big-time deep ball for reports to surface that he has a legit chance to start next year. We've seen reports like that already. He's still a 5th-round quarterback, and I'm buying him for cheap only. I'm only going to send like 3rd rounders at most, but they don't pick super high in the draft, so they're not going to have an opportunity to probably grab Stroud, Levis, Bryce Young, one of these guys. But they absolutely could bring in like a bridge quarterback, like a Marcus Mariota type, to compete with Sam Howell and see, let them duke it out in camp and see if Sam Howell can win the job. And I would not be surprised if he's the starting quarterback for the Commanders week 1 next year, but it is an uphill task for a 5th-round quarterback. So I like Sam Howell, still risk, but I do definitely like him. Desmond Ridder, the next quarterback in my rankings here, quarterback 32. Positives for him, obviously, that Ridder improved every game, going from PFF grades in the 40s in his first 2 starts to PFF grades of 67.2 and 75.7 in the games against Arizona and Tampa Bay to close out his rookie season. Only 4 starts, so not a huge sample size. I do think the Falcons, though, comparative to the Commanders, are more likely to address the quarterback situation, whether it is with their 8th overall pick. They have a draft, a young quarterback that they can draft at 8th overall, whether they trade for a guy like Ryan Tannehill, because we know they have the connection there with Arthur Smith, whether they go big and go aggressive after a Lamar Jackson type or something like that, or they go after somebody, like Derek Carr or somebody in free agency. I find it hard to believe personally that they'll go into the season with Desmond Ridder as their first string quarterback starter, no questions asked. I'd personally be selling Desmond Ridder at quarterback 25 prices, according to Keep Trade Cut. You could probably sell, Desmond Ridder and a 3rd for like a 2nd-round pick, or Desmond Ridder and a late 2nd-round pick for Mac Jones and a 3rd-round pick or something like that. I do think you could absolutely get trades like that done. Again, Desmond Ridder's helped himself a little bit, but not necessarily to the point that I want to hold him long-term in Dynasty. Malik Willis, the biggest disappointment for sure of this quarterback class, quarterback 33 in my rankings right now, quarterback 29 according to Keep Trade Cut. Malik Willis, from this quarterback class, was expected to be the Konami code guy. He was expected to be the fantasy performer, but he posted sub 65 PFF grades in all 3 starts that he got for Tennessee this year. We saw him run the ball 7+ times in 2 of those 3 starts, but for the most part, you got to wonder why this guy is so lost, if he's ever going to figure it out. And the big thing is, how much faith does the Titans brass actually have in him? Because John Robinson, who was the guy that drafted Malik Willis, the GM, was fired there mid-season this year. So they don't really have any ties to Malik Willis, given that the current regime is kind of being, turned over into somebody that's probably going to be a Mike Vrabel guy or something like that. I personally would sell Malik Willis right now for anybody who still believes in the tantalizing upside of Malik Willis, because he was this, great rushing threat in college. It looks like he's going to be a developmental guy, and developmental guys with third-round draft capital for a GM staff that's no longer in the building is definitely not a profile I want to attach myself to. So if you can get great value for Malik Willis, maybe a second-round pick somehow, definitely go ahead and do that. Matt Corral, who was the final quarterback of this class, did not play a game this year. Quarterback 34 in my rankings, quarterback 40 per keep trade cut. He was my quarterback 2 pre-draft. I thought he was a pretty solid prospect, a good day 2 type of quarterback. We never saw him this year because he suffered a season-ending injury in training camp to his foot, I believe it was. I think Carolina would have loved to get a look at him, especially given that the Baker Mayfield experiment went south this year. But I think that Matt Corral is probably going to be a victim of circumstance. He's probably not going to get a chance to start now. This year was his chance. Baker Mayfield, went sideways. If Matt Corral was on the roster healthy, I think he would have been the next guy in there. I don't hate sending like a 4th-round pick for Matt Corral, because I do think he was a solid college quarterback, but I'm not probably going to be sending much more than that, or like a 20th plus round startup pick just for shits and gigs. So Matt Corral, interesting guy, but probably not long for the NFL as a starter unless we had some kind of injury situations, or unless he just really impresses the team to the point that they forego drafting a quarterback or forego getting a free agent quarterback this year. So like I said, those are the way I have them ranked. You guys can see the keep trade cut values there as well. Now we can move on to the running back position. And for those of you guys that were following the draft cycle very closely, the consensus entering the draft cycle was it's Breece Hall, it's Kenneth Walker, and then really whoever else. Like, you could have talked to 10 different analysts and they would have told you, this guy's my RB3. No, this guy's the RB3. This guy's the RB3. And most of these guys who had RB3, one guy, the other guy had him RB10, because it was just a mess of guys. A lot of good, 3rd to 4th round caliber running back prospects. Going to go in the order that I have them ranked now, like I said, in the Manifesto 2.0. But as you guys can see, this is where I had them pre-draft. You can see Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Spiller, Tyler Allgeier, Dameon Pierce rounded up my top 5 running backs. James Cook, Brian Robinson, Bam Knight, Pierre Strong, Rachaad White closing out my top 10. And then a couple other guys that I graded. Tyrion Davis-Price actually graded after the draft once he went in the 3rd round. So like I said, that is the order that I had them. You guys can also see on the screen, I basically made this chart weighting how good these guys were relative to their fantasy points per game, PFF rushing grade, yards after contact per attempt, elusive rating, yards created per touch, and a bunch of metrics that basically determines, are these guys good players? And you guys can see, some of the usual suspects. Obviously, Breece Hall looks like he's a good running back, Kenneth Walker, etc. So I'm going to go through these and leave this on the screen as I go through, but we're going to start with the guy who I have ranked highest in my rankings from this Dynasty Rookie class in 2022 at the running back position, with Kenneth Walker, who is my RB3 in my rankings overall at the running back position, RB4 per keep trade cut. He's a super young running back. He's talented, and what appears to be a solid offense. I expect Geno Smith to be back with this team. He said he wants to be back. I think Pete Carroll likes him, and the Seahawks brass likes him. If the Seahawks don't retain Geno Smith, they probably draft a guy pretty high with the Denver Broncos pick anyway. I think Kenneth Walker is one of the few running backs that I would spend a top 3 to top 4 round startup pick on at just 22.2 years old. I think he's a firm hold, and there's really not much else I can say about Kenneth Walker. He did a great job improving his dynasty stock throughout this year. I don't think Rashad Penny being back and healthy next year will matter, because I think he's going to end up moving on in free agency. And if he's back, I don't think they're going to trust him with like a full workload or anything. So Kenneth Walker is currently my new RB1 of this class. And that's only due to injury, because Breece Hall, who is my RB2, RB5 in my rankings, RB1 per keep trade cut. I think the interesting thing to note with Breece Hall is this. Obviously, the dude is very talented. And if he'd never got injured, he would clearly be the RB1 in Dynasty right now. And it would be a big time debate this offseason between him and Bijan Robinson for who should be the real RB1 once Bijan gets drafted. And if he never blew his knee out, that would all be well and good. But we've seen how value can fluctuate with this injury. ACL tears for running back are a real thing. On the screen right now, you guys will see Saquon Barkley's dynasty value. And of course, Saquon Barkley suffered an ACL tear in his 2nd season after being the dynasty RB1 at the time of the injury. And of course, Breece Hall was the dynasty RB1 at the time of his injury as well. So I think this is a pretty apt comparison as a result. Breece Hall had a great profile. Saquon Barkley had a generational profile, indestructible profile. So if it can happen to Saquon Barkley, it can happen to anyone, is basically my point. Saquon struggled the first year off of his ACL tear in 2021, led to him getting an ankle injury against the Cowboys and a bunch of other, kind of compensatory compensatory type of things. And that led to his dynasty value this offseason plummeting to as low as borderline top 20 running back caliber value. Of course, you guys know at FSE, we were all over Saquon Barkley at value, second year removed from the ACL tear. But we know that first year removed from the ACL tear is going to affect how explosive Breece Hall is. And it may lead to people changing their opinions about Breece Hall and thinking he might not be as good of a running back as he is. And of course, we saw J.K. Dobbins now looks like he's back fully healthy in that playoff game. He's starting to look like the J.K. Dobbins we saw pre-injury as well. And I think the same will be the case for Breece Hall once he's 2 years removed from the ACL. You have to wonder if Breece Hall getting RB1 overall type of value and keep trade cut right now makes you need to sell him. To me, I think it does, because if you can get that type of value in return for Breece Hall, you mitigate all that risk of him, not looking like the same guy once he comes back. And even if you want to keep Breece Hall, what I think you should do is float him out in trade offers now. And then once he doesn't look quite like the same guy mid-season next year or early in the season next year, then maybe you can buy him at that point and reap the benefits long-term. And maybe you profit like a second-round pick out of it or something when it's all said and done. So that's my thoughts on Breece Hall. Again, I think he's a little overvalued right now. People aren't really taking into account the scope of the injury and how it's going to affect him. It's also, again, it limited half of his rookie season. It's going to eat into his second season. We're talking about a guy who's only going to be fully healthy, fully ready to go by his third NFL season. And at the running back position, those first 2 years of production are very, very crucial, because you typically only get, 4, 5, maybe 6, 7 years of running back production, period. So Breece getting injured was definitely horrible all around, and hopefully it's something that he can bounce back from. So we move on to the next running back from this draft class. RB3, as it currently stands right now, is Dameon Pierce. RB16 in my rankings overall, RB17 per keep trade cut. Now, thankfully for Dameon Pierce's dynasty value, he got banged up at the end of the season, but this dude was a top 24 running back before going down in week 15. His value will absolutely be talked about to no end this offseason. It's tied to opportunity. He's a starting running back for an NFL team, the Houston Texans, but I think it's worth mentioning that Dameon Pierce is still a great player, and I still think he can hold value similar to a James Robinson type, for example, a couple years ago. It's possible that he's again the starting back for the Texans next year, only now he has a talented young quarterback. Maybe it's Bryce Young, maybe it's CJ Stroud. We don't really know yet. Maybe more help around him at wide receiver if they draft like a Jordan Addison or something like that. And they'll probably have a much better coaching staff than Lovie Smith and some of the guys that they've had there in recent years. I actually think that he's a hold versus a sell, because I think a lot of people will tell you, oh, sell Dameon Pierce, fourth round running back. They're going to draft a guy. He's going to, disrupt Dameon Pierce's workload. But the reason I say he's a hold is because I think the market is already kind of preparing for that to potentially be in his range of outcomes versus, a guy like Elijah Mitchell or a guy like James Robinson in recent years, where the market was just ready to throw these guys as top 12, top 10 dynasty running backs. And we, know better now. With Dameon Pierce, people are understanding that maybe we shouldn't just vault this guy all the way up the board. Dameon Pierce, to me, at RB17, it's a fine middle ground, because if the Texans keep him as their week 1 bell cow, he's going to go back up to the top 12. Whereas if they draft, like, let's say, a second round running back to help compete with him for touches, then he's going to vault down to RB 20 to 25. So I do think his value right now is in a pretty solid middle ground, and I'd be more inclined to hold him than I would to sell him and see what happens. Because if they don't add a big time free agent running back, if they don't add a high drafted running back, then we're talking about a guy that will be a top 12 dynasty running back this time in August or so. So definitely a guy that I think is going to be an interesting conversation point nonetheless this offseason, but I'm actually a little bit higher on than I expected to, because I expected the market to overreact completely. And another guy that I expected the market to overreact completely on is Tyler Allgeier, who you guys know I was huge on coming into the draft. He was my RB4 pre-draft. He is my RB5 now, and I challenge you to find anybody that had him that high. Most people had him as like RB10, RB12, RB13. Tyler Allgeier, RB24 in my rankings, RB23 per keep trade cut. He ranked number 1 in this position group of the rookies in PFF rushing grade, among the best in yards after contact, creation, yards created per touch, and elusiveness. Like Pierce, you wonder if the guy is going to get somebody added to his backfield, and I think they probably will, because it's a run-heavy team. I think they're at least going to add a free agent running back, if not draft somebody pretty highly. How low does his value go, though, right? Because like I said, he is valued at RB23 per keep trade cut. He's still a young running back. He's still talented. And even if they add, a complimentary guy, he's still going to have some value. But again, if Atlanta goes into the season with Tyler Allgeier and Cordero Patterson the way that they have this year, or maybe Tyler Allgeier and a late day 3 pick running back, then we could be talking about a guy that moves up to like RB15, RB16, RB12 potentially in dynasty value. So I think, again, he's priced appropriately. He's in that middle ground of a guy that, if they add a running back, he probably falls to like RB30, RB31 type of area. But if they don't add a running back, he's probably RB15 to 18 type of area. So I think he's appropriately priced. I think, again, I'm more inclined to hold a guy like Tyler Allgeier than I would be to sell or buy him. Moving on to the next running back, who I definitely need to eat a little bit of crow on because I had him as my RB10 pre-draft and I have him as my RB6 now. So obviously he's gone up in value, and that's Rachaad White. But I do think, even though I'm eating crow on Rachaad White and saying that he's definitely better than I expected, I still think that you should sell him because he's RB20 right now per keep trade cut. He's RB27 in my rankings. Unlike the previous four guys that I've just talked about at this position, I'm not entirely sure that Rachaad White is a good runner of the football. I know he's a great receiver, but his rushing stats are not encouraging, as you guys can see on the screen. And he kind of goes exactly in line with what I thought of him coming out of Arizona State. The reason he was my RB10, I compared him to Kenyon Drake. I think he's a good complementary back. I think he can contribute as a receiver, but I don't think he has like a full 3-down bell cow type of workload. He's also a great athlete, and that goes into his profile as well. I think he's better than what I thought he was, and I'll take that L for sure, but it mostly has been situational factors driving his value up because, he plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, and he was a 3rd-round draft pick, and, he gets receiving targets from Tom Brady and, some opportunity with Leonard Fournette's inefficiencies. So some of the situational factors have helped him, which is, of course, important at the running back position. But like I said, I don't think Rachaad White's presence precludes, Jason Light, the Buccaneers GM, from drafting a Zach Charbonnet in the 2nd round this year, or just keeping a guy like Leonard Fournette. And I think a lot of people are, ranking Rachaad White as RB20 because they're just assuming Leonard Fournette's going to go away or assuming that he's going to be a load in this backfield at some point in time. I think he's a solid sell right now. I would flip him for like an early 2nd round pick if you can get one, or an equivalently priced wide receiver. If you can get like Elijah Moore or something like that for Rachaad White, I would probably be, searching for trades like that. So definitely a guy that I think I'm a little lower on, but I definitely was, wrong on, relatively speaking. James Cook, a guy that's pretty much, I've been on par with market and consensus the whole time. James Cook really has come on as the season has gone along, but the Buffalo Bills' hesitancy to give a 2nd round back who they spent, a top 64 pick on, a bigger workload, only one time did he exceed a 50% snap share, is kind of discouraging in my opinion. I think it's all but a guarantee that they're going to either add somebody to this backfield, keep Devin Singletary, or sign a free agent. If Devin Singletary moves on in free agency, I expect the Buffalo Bills to sign an Alexander Mattison or something like that, or to draft a guy again in the 2nd round, or maybe the 1st round if Bijan were to slide to them or something like that, and keep James Cook in a committee, because James Cook is 5'11", 199 pounds with a BMI in the 10th percentile. I do not think, just because he plays for the Buffalo Bills, that we should go insane about James Cook thinking that he's going to be suddenly a bell cow running back, because he simply doesn't have the size profile to be one. So even though he's going to be in a committee, he plays for Buffalo, so he's going to be valuable, and that's all well and good. But Tyler Allgeier, Dameon Pierce, some of the guys that I favored over him pre-draft, the reason I favored them is because they have the size profiles to be bigger, better running backs and get a bigger workload, and I think that's the case with James Cook. So he's a good player, but I would sell him if people think that he's eventually going to become the workhorse of the team, because I just don't ever see that happening. He doesn't have the size profile. He doesn't have the BMI to be able to command that type of workload. And we've kind of seen the Buffalo Bills show us that, because there was periods of time where Devin Singletary wasn't giving them, elite efficient play, and they could have very easily pivoted to a guy like James Cook. And I think had they had like Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker on the roster, then they definitely would have done that at that point in time. But we didn't see them do that. They went out and traded for Nyheim Hines. They started splitting touches and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that James Cook is suddenly going to become a workhorse for this team next year. I think they're going to add somebody. I think they're going to keep Singletary, whatever the case is. So definitely a guy that I think I would sell if you can get high market value for him. Brian Robinson, RB31 in my rankings, RB26 per keep trade cut. He's a fine NFL running back, but I still lean sell with Brian Robinson, given all the things that can change in that backfield. He isn't all that efficient on his touches, which is why I'm not, extremely confident that this guy can make the most of them. He needs opportunity to be great for fantasy. And as long as Antonio Gibson's there, he's got 1 year left on his rookie deal. I don't expect workhorse usage out of Brian Robinson. I think he's going to be like the same RB3 that he was this year. And if Gibson were to leave or be traded this offseason, I think they would probably add somebody to help complement Brian Robinson. He's not a world beater to the point that you absolutely could upgrade at that position. If you trade Brian Robinson, in a 2nd round pick, you could probably get up to a much better running back, or trade Brian Robinson in a 3rd to get to a similar running back in a better situation. So Isaih Pacheco, RB35 in my rankings, RB29 per keep trade cut. He's simply this high due to opportunity because he plays for Kansas City, and he's gotten a pretty decent workload this year, and he's, I guess a pretty good player as well. But there's plenty of free agents available. It's a great running back class, as I've kind of regurgitated for most of these players. I would sell Isaih Pacheco now. If I had Isaih Pacheco on a lot of my rosters, he's a fine player, but I highly doubt that he stays this high in dynasty value come August, because even if they add somebody small, This is a 7th round running back, a 7th round investment we're talking about, not a guy that was drafted in the 2nd round or the 3rd round that we feel confident in. So, I mean, if Jerick McKinnon has been enough to take away touches from Isaih Pacheco, they bring in Alexander Mattison, or they bring in, name free agent running back or 2nd or 3rd round running back that you like in the draft, then it's really, really going to kill Isaih Pacheco's dynasty value to the point that he's going to fall down to like RB 50 in the rankings. And I don't see him going much higher, even if we knew he was going into the season, just him and Jerick McKinnon this time next year. So the final guy that I'm going to go in depth with at this position is Isaiah Spiller, because he was my RB3 pre-draft. And again, similar to what I said with Tyler Allgeier with Dameon Pierce, the reason I liked him up there is because I thought he had a well-rounded skill set. I thought he, maybe wasn't the greatest athlete, but I thought he could catch the ball, thought he could run really well. I thought he was elusive and all that good stuff. But he is RB40 in my rankings right now. He slipped down to whatever this is, like my RB8 or 9 at this point in the Dynasty Rookie class. On one hand, the running back position is one of opportunity, and I can't fault Isaiah Spiller too much for being caught behind the RB1 in fantasy, Austin Eckler, this year, but it's not going to lead to much volume when you're not efficient on your touches, and also when he was banged up this year. So you can't really point to anything with Isaiah Spiller being the reason why you'd be optimistic about him, aside from the fact that you maybe liked him as a prospect like I did. So he wasn't efficient on the carries that he did get. We've seen good backs red-shirted their rookie years, like Damien Harris, for example. He wasn't very active his rookie year either. And then maybe once he got to learn the NFL system or whatever he needed to do, they started to use him in the New England Patriots offense. I still have hope for Isaiah Spiller because his one saving grace is, like I said, I liked him as a prospect. And number two, he was a bit raw as a prospect because he is currently the youngest active running back in the NFL. He is 21.4 years old. He will not be 22 until preseason this year. So he is a very, very young running back. He would be younger than a lot of the running backs in this draft class coming up. So the fact that Isaiah Spiller, didn't get a whole lot of run and wasn't efficient when he did get run, it concerns me for sure, but I don't think this is some, sound the alarm, throw the towel in on this guy, because it's not like he's a wide receiver. The position that he plays is one of opportunity, and if he can't get on the field because he's been banged up and because he has veterans in front of him, there's nothing really he can do about that aside from play well in practice. And sometimes we see running backs come out of the woodworks their 2nd and their 3rd years and suddenly look a lot better, command a lot more volume, and I think that could be the case with Isaiah Spiller as a complement maybe to Austin Eckler as early as next year. There's a couple extra guys that I wanted to talk about: Keontae Ingram, Pierre Strong, Tyrion Davis-Price, Zonovan Knight, Jalen Warren, and Kevin Harris. All these guys kind of have their flaws here and there, whether it's, opportunity or the backfields that they play in. But I do think all of them are pretty solid dynasty investments, dynasty holds. If you could get, any one of those players for like 4th round picks, I do think they're probably fine dart throws to go after, especially Pierre Strong, Zonovan Knight, and Jalen Warren as guys that are pretty much like one injury away from having a lot of workloads and a lot of, carries under their belt. So definitely, I hope you guys enjoyed this. It's about, 25, 28 minutes or so. By the time I was done this, I will talk about wide receivers and tight ends in tomorrow's video. So let me know down below what you guys thought of this video. Who was I right on? Who was I wrong on? What do you agree with? What don't you disagree with? And again, check out the Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0 available on Patreon. That will be launching later tonight. Of course, go Bucks. I'm recording this Monday during the day. Me and Danny will be live before that game. Obviously, my Bucks versus his Cowboys. We have to do something about it for sure. So definitely good luck to the Bucks tonight. Hopefully they win. But peace out. We'll talk to you soon.
Wire me the money.